Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by the last man standing with loserpool.com. As ever, I am your host, Harry Symeou, and I thought I'd bring you a brief reaction video to the news that Unai Emery has been sacked. He is no longer the Arsenal manager. He will be replaced on an interim basis by Freddie Ljungberg, the super Swede, the man with the red hair. We love you, Freddie. You know the song. Apologies that I've not been very active on the channel today. As you can imagine, with the news of Unai Emery's departure, it's been a really crazy day for me. I've been on Love Sport Radio twice. I've been on Talk Sport. I've been down at 90 Min recording a show with those guys down there as well. Please do check that out. If I remember, I'll leave the link in the description. If not, just type in 90 Min. You can't miss them. We spoke at length about the Unai Emery dismissal today. So I just wanted to share my thoughts and my opinions, and those of you who have followed me or follow this channel will know that for a while I've wanted to see the back of Unai Emery. I wasn't convinced about him last season, and this season has cemented my beliefs that Unai Emery was not the man to take Arsenal forward. It's nothing personal. I'm sure Unai's a lovely guy, and from the club's statement, it was evident that the club never really had an issue with his work ethic or his desire to succeed. So credit to Unai Emery. He obviously cares about his job, but unfortunately this job was too big for him. It was too much for him, and his sacking was inevitable. Let's be honest. Results had taken a turn for the worse. The atmosphere around the club was poor. The attitude of the players towards him was visibly damaged as well. And I think last night, so Thursday night's game at the Emirates against Eintracht Frankfurt, the result was poor and the result would have gone against him. But I think when you looked around the stadium and you saw so many empty seats, I think that was damning. I think that's what pushed the Arsenal board to finally pull the trigger on Unai Emery and to move him on. And, you'd hope that they'd been thinking about this for a few weeks and that maybe a potential successor is already on the cards. Perhaps conversations have already taken place. We don't know that for sure. But the announcement came out this morning that he's gone. Now, over the course of the next few days, I'm going to be bringing you more content where I'm going to look into a little bit more detail about what went wrong for Unai Emery. We're not going to preview the Norwich game now because, quite frankly, it's a little bit late, and the Unai Emery story trumps that, in my opinion. If I get a chance, I might do a short video just talking about a little bit about that game. But when you don't know what the manager's going to do, so when you don't know Freddie Ljungberg as a manager, which we don't, it's very difficult to make predictions. It's very difficult to try and work out how a game is going to pan out, because of course we don't know what Freddie's going to change, whether he'll change the tactics, what personnel he's going to go with. So there's lots of questions unanswered about that, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see. We'll have to learn about Freddie as we go along. Now, of course, Ljungberg cannot be the permanent manager based on the fact that he doesn't have his UEFA Pro license at the minute. Which means he can only be in interim charge for 12 weeks. I believe that's the rule. I've read that in a few places today. If I'm wrong, correct me, because I don't know for certain. I haven't sat and looked into that. Today's been more about sort of reacting to Emery's departure, and it's been a crazy day, like I said. Lots of articles as well to come on thisisfootball.com, so check those out as well. They'll be coming out throughout the evening and, of course, tomorrow morning as well. But with Unai Emery, if I had to summarise what I think went wrong for Unai, I'd say that his indecision and hesitation at times is probably what cost him. There was an article in The Athletic today, I don't know if anyone's read it, where it speaks about the fact that he dwelled over the captaincy, the fact that he dwelled over the Aaron Ramsey stuff. Apparently Aaron Ramsey's representative sat down with Unai Emery in a bid to try and understand his role a little bit more prior to deciding that they were going to leave the club, and they didn't really get what they wanted out of that meeting. And I feel like with Unai Emery, indecision has cost him in regards to a number of things. And there comes a point where when you can't make your mind up about something and you keep on changing it, those who are supposed to be following you will start to question your ideologies. On the one hand, you've got this manager who is very precise about the roles that he wants his players to do, very pragmatic in the sense that The passing patterns have to be the way he wants them. The positioning has to be the way he wants them. Probably doesn't give players as much freedom as other managers. And then on the other hand, you've got this guy who can't settle on anything. So if you've got somebody who's so adamant yet keeps changing his own mind, then at some point you're going to question him. And I think that's what happened towards the end of Unai Emery's tenure. I think the players stopped playing for him. They stopped believing in him. The fans stopped believing in him. And ultimately, it was one of those situations where it just had to end before it got really, really toxic. Put out a brief video last night. I was in Unai Emery's press conference yesterday at the Emirates Stadium. I spoke about his demeanour. And, you know, looking at him and knowing what we know now, that the trigger has been pulled the following morning, you kind of got that from him when you saw his attitude. And, you know, I don't know how many of you guys have seen it visibly, sort of maybe on TV or whatever, but for me, what was most striking was when he first walked into the room and the way he took time to sort of gather his thoughts. He took a massive gulp of water, almost down the whole bottle, as if to say, you know what, I've got a difficult few moments coming up. So I think Unai Emery will have probably known, and, you know, there were reports today that he would have gone to the training ground and he didn't have a clue. There's no way he didn't have a clue that was coming. He would have had an inkling. And, you know, he's said to have accepted it respectfully. He's said to have been professional in the way he's acted. Having been dismissed, he went and said bye to all the players in the right way. And a few players have come out. I've seen David Luiz's one, a tweet saying sorry to the boss for letting him down, etc., etc. And you know, let's not forget that the players have to take some blame in this too. The board have to take a lot of blame in this for allowing it to continue as long as it did. They made the wrong appointment, in my opinion. And when you look at Unai Emery's CV prior to coming to Arsenal, it feels like, based on all the things that Arsenal told us he was, it feels like they didn't really do their research properly. It feels like they only scratched the surface in terms of Unai Emery. They spoke about someone who will carry on the philosophy of attacking football. That's absolutely not what Unai Emery done. Absolutely not. In fact, it was the complete opposite. We're talking about a manager who wanted to play back fives at home to the likes of Southampton. So, you know, it's really difficult to believe that he convinced them into doing that. It just feels like it was a bit of an appointment where, you know, Arsenal made out they'd done all their homework, but in terms of actually digging into Unai Emery, the things that always occur with him, which are falling out with key players, poor man management, pragmatism, perhaps too much pragmatism, all these things are traits of Unai Emery that he's taken around with him throughout his career. And Arsenal obviously didn't know that, which means they didn't do their jobs properly. Now, of course, this is the first appointment that Raul is going to oversee. Apparently, there's a panel of Raul, Husfami, Vinay Venkatesham and Edu who will be deciding who the next manager is. And fingers crossed they get it right. I've said it time and time again. We could be in a situation where we go through 3 or 4 managers before we find the manager that's going to lead us for 5 or 6 seasons. That's the way of modern football now. Everything is very knee-jerk. Everything is very reactionary. Results are so important. Financials are so important. And not being in the Champions League is doing this club serious damage, not just in terms of the bank account, but when you look at the status of the club. You know, you stay out of the Champions League for 1, 2 seasons. Yeah, it's not ideal and people recognise it's not good enough and you're not where you need to be, but they also acknowledge that Arsenal Football Club are still a Champions League sized club. Well, the longer we stay out of it, the more that reputation that we've had over the years will fade. It will be more difficult to attract the best managers. It will be more difficult to attract the best players, and the rot needs to stop. Now, of course, Arsenal can still make the top 4. It's not mathematically impossible. If we string a good run of results together, you never know what's going to happen. The teams that we're chasing, you know, they've been up and down. You know, Leicester have won their last 5, I think, but, you know, I expect them to have a blip at some point. I expect Chelsea to have a blip at some point. Watched them against Valencia the other night, and they were very, very fortunate to get away with a point from there. So there is hope still. But I'm glad that it's been done now rather than later. For me, I would have done it a little bit earlier. I probably would have pulled the trigger. I wanted to do it at the end of last season, I wanted them to do it at the end of last season. But for me, I understood why they gave him the beginning of this season to do something. But it's gone on 4 or 5 weeks too long for me, and he should have been out the door by now. In terms of potential replacements, the talk is that Nuno is very interested from Wolves, of course. But of course, there would be a compensation that would need to be agreed with Wolves in order to get him out of his contract. Max Allegri has supposedly been contacted. Carlo Ancelotti has issues at Napoli at the moment. There's a lot of unrest with the owner. So that could be a potential option. Mikel Arteta is on the shortlist too. And interestingly, I think on the shortlist that went out on Sky Sports, I believe it was today, Maurizio Pochettino wasn't on that. I don't expect Maurizio Pochettino to join Arsenal. Would I take him? I'm not sure he'd be my number one choice, but when I was given the choice between him and Unai Emery, I would have taken him for sure. I'd like to see an Allegri come in or an Ancelotti, because I think that this job needs someone with that huge personality, with that huge reputation, somebody who is as big as the job, to come in and really put the chickens in order, because at the moment it feels like certain players are disinterested. It feels like it needs a really strong character. I think there will be an uplift given that Ljungberg's taken over, just because we've got rid of that negative effect which was Unai Emery. And if you look at United last season with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you saw an immediate uplift. I don't think Arsenal should do what Man United done and give him the job on a permanent basis, because at this point Ljungberg's proved nothing. And even if he does win 4 or 5 games on the spin, for me that still doesn't make him a genuine candidate for the job. I love Freddie Ljungberg. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him. I think he's fantastic. I absolutely adore the guy. But he's had no managerial experience and no real elite level coaching experience. When you compare him to Mikel Arteta, they've both sort of been assistants, but Arteta has been doing it longer. He's been doing it with Pep Guardiola, who for me is currently the best manager in the world. So, you know, I think Arteta's a little bit further forward than him in terms of his progression line. But that's my thoughts on it today. A better dash. Supposed to be going out with a meal for some friends, running a bit late, work's been chaos today. Apologies I haven't got anything else out today, but we'll be bringing you more content looking at this big story, looking at the Norwich game, of course, in the coming days. So please stay tuned. If you haven't already, hit like, hit the subscribe button and share this video. Until next time, take care.